What is going on, soccer card fiends? Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and today we are here to talk about my outlook of the soccer card market going into 2022. So, of course, this is just my opinion. No one can predict the future. No one knows. So, if you're expecting a hard and concise and true proof of everything that's going to happen, who knows? It's anyone's best guess, and that's what I will go ahead and do today. So, as we know, I guess if you've been involved long enough, the soccer card market in the last year, we saw a big boom in the early spring, followed by what's been a nice sell-off for basically the rest of the year. Now, I think we are prepared to go ahead and have a pretty nice year. Of course, we have World Cup coming up this year, so as far as my outlook going forward, essentially what I'm seeing and what I believe will happen would be that people might get a little enticed into a New Year bump. Last year we saw that rise in early spring, so a lot of people are probably expecting that again this year. I'm not sure if that's the case. Last year there was kind of the crypto boom, the Top Shot boom, the this, that, the other boom, the stimmy checks, the whole 9 yards. There was a lot of things going into the boom last year, so I don't think that it's simple enough to say that, hey, the market boomed last year at this time, it'll boom this year again at this time. I don't think that's really the case. I do think that we'll be in a better spot. One of the underlying things that you have to think about during this entire sell-off has been that PSA cards are being returned. Like, people aren't selling off necessarily because they don't believe in the hobby. People are selling off because they submitted cards that they planned on selling, and it just took forever for them to come back. So we were reaching a point of sort of equilibrium. We're getting towards the end of the backlog, and the reason I know that is because, well, I have cards in the backlog that were sort of towards the end of the backlog, and they're about to be graded. So I have a vested interest, and I keep an active eye on what's going on there, and we're getting towards the end of the PSA backlog, which is good. That's what we want to see. So once that's done, I think that we'll see the market then carry on, because people want to know how much is out there. People want to know how much has come back from PSA. And once that backlog's done, we'll have a good idea and people will have more confidence in the market. So as far as the early months of the year, I don't think there will be anything crazy. I think as we get into March, April, May, sort of the latter stages of the year for the leagues and for the Champions League, then I think that's where you'll see a bump. I don't think it'll be everything going up, but it will be, main stars, mainstay figures, good performers of the moment. I think that we'll get sort of back to a point where, the hobby will be sort of firing again. Not to say that, and again, I think this is something that everyone has to understand, is expectations for returns at this point are probably too high, like being realistic with you guys. The things that we've seen in the soccer card and in the card market and in a lot of different markets over the last couple years aren't natural. Those aren't normal increases. Those aren't how markets work. Those aren't good examples. So if you're expecting, oh, Champions League comes on, that means my card's double or triple again, I don't know. Unless you're, if you got a standout performer, maybe. But yeah, I wouldn't count on it. So I'm seeing, in my opinion, that there will be a little bit of a bump, nothing too crazy, and then we'll get into the summer months. And during the summer months, if you aren't aware, the World Cup this year is not during the summer. I think that there are sort of the normies that don't know that, so would recommend you do a little bit more research, figure that out, because it's obviously important. But during the summer months, I don't think much will be happening. I think that the summer months will be relatively calm in the sense that typically once the seasons are over, there's the dip, but also there's going to be a lot of hype for the World Cup. And so there might not be as much of a dip as there should be, because there will be people prospecting and speculating on the World Cup. And so with that, I think the summer will be relatively tame. And then I think going into... this is where it becomes tricky, is like the World Cup's going to be in November and December. So when does the peak happen? That's what everyone wants to know. When do I sell? When's the peak? And the thing is there's no way to know. The best way to go about it is to sell a little bit whenever you feel it's worthwhile. Don't try to predict the peak. Try to sell into the hype, basically. Sell a little bit, sell a little bit, sell a little bit, and you'll be good. So with that, I'm not sure. No one is. Essentially, it's weird because during August, that would be about when I would typically think people are going to start getting into something like the World Cup. So maybe like late summer, there's sort of a little bit of a rush to get in on World Cup stuff before it happens. But then you also have to imagine that once September hits, NFL's going to start. Now, I don't know if the NFL audience and the World Cup audience is much of an overlap, but it will be a little bit of a distraction. NFL will start in September, and then after that, a month or two later, the NBA is going to start. So there are the starts of the season that might delay the spike. Typically, I would say that you're probably better off selling before the World Cup rather than once it starts. But given that I think people's attention will be diverted, I think there's a good chance that the peak might not happen until the World Cup is started and into the World Cup, which, I don't know. It's very intuitive that the peak would happen once the World Cup starts, but you also have to think that that's how everyone thinks, so typically they want to get in early. But because they want to get in early, but they're distracted, they're not going to get in early. So I think it's going to be a little bit more of a delayed spike. Even then, again, when I say spike, when I say that these rise ups in the market, I'm not talking 5, 10x like we've seen lately. You know, maybe some players have that, maybe. But I'm not advising you look for just substantial, unwarranted returns, because you have to be happy to an extent with what you have. You can't always ask for your cards to go to the moon, because it's just not realistic. So as far as where people are going to have their attention focused, it's fairly obvious that it will be in the pre-modern and ultra-modern market, basically the markets where the players are actually playing. That makes a ton of sense. In the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of people hop into the vintage market, and while that's fun and while that's a great place to be, I'm not knocking it. As much as there are ebbs and flows in the hobby, there are ebbs and flows in different segments that people want to be a part in. And so I don't think that this is going to be the year of vintage. I don't think this is going to be the year of 80s or 90s stickers and cards. Of course, if the market does take a step up, those things will come up accordingly. People will trade back into those. But I mean, obviously most people's focus is going to be on the players that are, at hand actually playing. So that makes a ton of sense. There's really nothing too much to talk about in regard to that. I've seen a lot of smart people in the soccer space that are starting to speculate and prospect already, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you believe in these guys, you'd rather buy now than buying at the World Cup. However, one thing I will be very, truthful with you guys. I don't know why I wouldn't be truthful, but be careful, because whenever, last year when the Euros came around, everyone was talking about Mbappe. Everyone was, Mbappe this, Mbappe that. I sold all my Mbappes before the Euros. I was buying in the December dip. I was selling into the Euro hype, because realistically, unless you win this World Cup, odds are it's not gonna do much for you. Whenever we look back on 2018, does anyone talk about Luka Modric? No. So he's a great player that led his team very far into that World Cup, and basically unexpected by all means, and no one talks about it. Same thing goes for, no one even in the hobby talks about the Euros from last year. Like no one mentions Italian players like, oh, they have a Euro Cup to their name now. No one mentions English players that got to the final, So you really have to perform. You really, really, really have to perform. So whenever you're prospecting, personally, I like buying into a basket of USMNT players, because I think USMNT players have a ton of room to grow holistically, because the sport will grow in America. But in terms of soccer prospecting and other European, Asian, African, South American stars, you have to get the player right. The player has to do well, because the sport, for one, is not going to grow in those places. Maybe it can a little bit, but the sport can't really grow everywhere else. It's already the most popular sport in the world. You would need the hobby to grow substantially for those guys to really get a bump, to really boost up collectively. And that's implying that all of these foreigners, well, I guess they're foreigners to me, obviously, it's soccer's the world sport, but all of these different countries, all of these different people from these countries would have to get into prospecting. They'd have to get into the new young guys. And realistically, whenever I see Europeans and Asians and everyone, whenever I see all of these people get into the soccer market, they usually buy what they love, they buy what they enjoy, because they truly love the sport. And that's something that you don't see as much with Americans. They like to prospect because, in my opinion, they don't have a substantial knowledge base of the sport. They don't understand it fully, and they don't want to go back and relive it because they don't know it. And so I think it's harder to sell the average soccer or footballing fan on prospecting, because there's already so many people they love and adore that they'd rather go collect. So I think that in terms of investing in young guys, personally, I believe in the USMNT, because I think people here are really going to like them, and this is really how our sport will grow and what we will care about. But for most people, it isn't. So you have to recognize that. And so for that reason, I'd be skeptical on loading up on a ton of different young guys. Pick a couple, pick your spots, and just enjoy it. And just be extremely careful in the sense that if you're prospecting on these guys, don't bet anything you aren't willing to lose. This is somewhat gambling. Of course, you're hoping the market goes up and maybe you can sell into the hype, but at the same time, everyone in the soccer card market knows the World Cup's coming up this year. You know, you're not surprising anyone in that regard. So it's almost built into the prices. Now, the, kind of outlier here is what if a ton of more people pile into the soccer card hobby? Which, I mean, it's been proven over time that every single World Cup, a lot of people pile into soccer cards. And given the state of the card market, I think they will again. With that said, I also think that the collector base this year will grow because in the last year or two, well, in the last year specifically, the card market has gone down in soccer a good bit. Now, I'm saying, and I believe that the card market's gone down because prices were overinflated because there weren't enough graded slabs, and now there's enough graded slabs, so prices have come down a good bit. And I think that's natural. I think that's healthy. And with that, whenever I look at Instagram, every single day I go through the hashtag soccer cards. I scroll through there. I like all the posts. I follow all the people. I try to see what's going on. Interact with as much stuff as I can and see what the hobby's all about. And like a year or two ago, I'd scroll through there. It'd take me 4 or 5 minutes. It'd be quick. Now when I scroll through, it's like 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes I don't even make it through the full day. And so essentially what that shows me is the collector base has grown a lot. So I think that the soccer card market's in a very healthy space. If the amount of Instagram posts stayed the same or maybe increased marginally, I'd be a little worried that we're all just amping ourselves up for nothing. But I truly do believe that the collector base has grown a lot. And as you've seen in soccer in the past, whenever there's that influx of people into a certain part of the market, Prism, for example, in Prism there was an ample amount of, there's a lot of Prism, and that still got to extremely high prices. With the rest of the market, there's not a ton. So I really do think there's a lot of upside this year. I would say it's not as easy to predict the peak. It never really is, but looking at this year, I'm guessing it will happen as the World Cup starts, but you can't go wrong if you sell off beforehand if you notice the market has taken a step up. So with that said, just be careful and, hope for the best, expect the worst, just a cliche saying, but that's a good way of saying just be prepared. Hedge yourself if needed, and have a good old time this year. That's what it's all about. That's what the hobby's about, enjoying yourself and having a great old time. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like. On top of anything you'd like to tell me or others in terms of the World Cup and what you're seeing this year in the soccer card market. Would love to hear it down below in a comment. And if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day, and peace.